Good morning, Stephanie.
Good morning, Claire.
So thank you for being here for the Clarity Conversations. I'm very excited to have you.
Thanks, I'm thrilled to be here.
Okay, good. So let me give a little context of why you and I have known each other about a year and a half, and it's been incredible for me to learn about your work. You have a business that you call the Courageous Leadership Project, which really goes far beyond conflict management, but a lot of what we're going to talk about today, just for context for my viewers, is going to be about how do you manage yourself in tension situations, either at work or at any time in your life. Yeah?
Yep, that's it.
Good. I'm going to read a tiny bit of bio on you. So you have 25, and I have to say, those of us who know you know that you're like, I'm gonna go there. You're like the Tony Robbins of Canada, right? You're a big deal. You've done some really major things up there. And so what I want to say is you have 25 years of experience in high conflict, high emotion, high stakes situations. You've worked on 5 continents facilitating tough conversations on important issues. Your work ranges from protests over energy projects, which I know was a big deal about a pipeline development in the north part of Canada, to deep conversations about community rebuilding after natural disasters and every other topic in between. You've been the recipient of numerous international awards for your work. So in terms of what you do in your work, you see a world where a new kind of leader is needed, willing to be brave and honest about the things that matter. When leaders show up with fierce courage, open hearts, and a deep commitment to integrity, people can move from stuck to possible. I love that. You believe that brave, honest conversations are how we will solve the big challenges in our world together. And Lord knows we've got some big ones.
We do, some really big ones, yeah.
Good. So let me start with what is different. There's a very different quality to what you do, to the idea of the Courageous Leadership Project versus just conflict management. Tell us about that.
Well, so back in the dinosaur ages, I was trained in alternative dispute resolution and conflict management, and I used it early in my career, and over the years I have come to believe that it just doesn't work anymore. The world we live in is full of outrage and polarization, and sort of like people are so far apart on we're talking right now at a time when the US government is shut down and there's no end in sight, right? So the sides are getting further and further apart. And I don't think conflict management works. It's based in this premise of control and who holds the control, and sort of an idea of sort of interest-based negotiation. If I can get you to identify the thing that matters most to you, then we can find some common ground. But it doesn't take into account the intensity of the emotion that people have, the deep distrust of government, of each other, of only sort of aligning with the people who think like us and act like us. So for me, brave, honest conversations requires you to show up differently. It's not about how can you negotiate and everybody can lose a little in this conversation, or how can we control the environment that we're talking in. It's actually about stepping forward with courage and an open heart and saying, okay, this is going to be messy and we might not figure it all out, but how do we really understand each other, like really understand where each other are coming from, talk about the tough stuff, and then recognize that the only way forward is for us to move forward together. So what do you need and what do I need, and how do we build something new instead of just modifying the edges of the old thing that we had? That's for me what's really different.
You're making me think of, thank you for that. You're making me think of a friend who recently told me that his hometown is in one political end of the spectrum, and he now lives in New York, which is the other political end of the spectrum. And he says, but when you talk to families, they're only talking about the same things.
Yes.
So it's, how do we express it? But in reality, we all want the same things. We want to be happy. We want our families to feel safe and all the rest, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And how do we start with that? Like at that basis, seeing each other as human beings,
Yep.
right? You know, someone else who maybe is of a different political stripe than you, or has a different socioeconomic class, or holds particular different values. At their essence, they're a human being. And so if you can start there and be really honest about your own fears and your own hopes, when you do that, then they will do it too. You can see somebody else with a whole different light. And that, of course, I'm talking about big conflict and high stakes, but I mean, this is about your conversations with your children and with your parents and with your boss and with your neighbor. So it all applies the same way. As soon as we get into the place of judgment or telling ourselves stories about somebody else or about a situation, we've lost the ability to meet someone where they're at.
Yes. So I love that you're going into the workplace, because all this sounds very idealistic, right? And I think the viewers would love some tangible answers. So you said something about what you're making up about somebody else. And one of the things I talk about a lot is intention versus action. So how do you recommend to people that they separate and consider someone's intention at work versus an action or a way of behaving that might turn them off? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, it does. It really does. But I think there's a step before that. Like before you can think about somebody else's intention, which means you're thinking about them with kindness, really, rather than judging them based on their behaviors. I think you have to first get clear on what's going on for yourself, right? What buttons of yours have they pushed? I have this thing I always say that a friend once sent to me, that I know I'm pushing your buttons, but I didn't put them there.
Wow.
So if you're in a conflict with somebody at work and you are frustrated and irritated and upset by their behaviors, well, that's your stuff that's coming up, not theirs. But we're really quick to be comfortable talking about other people's stuff, not our own. So you know, just spend a couple of minutes thinking about what are they triggering in you and why are they triggering it?
Yes. And
then you know, kind of. Oh, I was thinking like, kind of think about putting it like in a box. You're not going to put the lid on it, but you're going to be like, okay, so now I understand that. Now put it to the side. Yeah. Then think about that person. And instead of judging what they've done, ask yourself what might be going on for them right now. And then just stop there. It totally shifts your perspective to them being someone who's done horrible things to, oh, wow, well, maybe they're in the middle of a divorce, or maybe they had a fight with their teenage child, or maybe they're not, you know, feeling well, or they're just really having a crappy day. Whatever it is, it allows you to give just a little leeway to somebody else.
Or maybe they're intimidated by their work reality, and they're not feeling like they're moving ahead the way they'd like, and they feel scared. It's interesting what you said about this, putting it in, like recognizing your buttons and I think putting it in the box doesn't mean you ignore it.
No.
It means you own it, and there's no judgment in that. I think, you know, when I do with people the classic I feel, because there's a little bit of sticking on the I feel. They're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, how does it make you feel? Because what they did would make 5 different people feel 5 different ways. What matters is you and your buttons, right?
Yes, absolutely. And the ability to just distinguish the parts to it. So like brave, honest conversations are not about you showing up perfectly, right? They're not about all of a sudden you're brave and honest and you have these amazing superpowers. It's actually that you practice this acceptance that this is going to be uncomfortable and messy. Yes. And challenging, and maybe not actually feel that awesome for you and perhaps for the other person too, but you're in it because you believe you can solve this problem, because you are committed to the relationship, that you want to, make your team effective. You have to know the why you're having a brave, honest conversation, but it's not about you all of a sudden showing up perfectly. It's about you just being with the discomfort and accepting it, and accepting your own stuff as well as somebody else's stuff. We have a tendency to accept our own stuff and judge other people's stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love this thing that keeps bubbling up about perfectionism.
Yeah.
Because, you know, coming from the cosmetics world, there's a lot of really, I'll say nice young ladies, but just a lot of people in general, big city markets, employment markets like New York, there's a lot of pressure to be perfect, to be better than everybody else. And, you know, it can make for a very brittle, anyway, I don't know if that's something you want to comment on, but this idea of perfection is, how does that play?
Well, I think it plays out in different ways in my work. It plays out with people who are risk averse because they don't want to rock the boat. It plays out with people who want to be seen or perceived in a particular way. Like they want to be seen as professional. I get that all the time. Well, it's not professional to talk about our feelings. Well, if your team is totally dysfunctional, maybe it's time to talk about what's going on in your team. And that includes feelings. Up in a lot of harm. I often say that the things we don't talk about are the things that cause us harm. And so when we're busy presenting an image, then that's where we're putting our energy and our effort, rather than actually in results or relationship or outcomes or a stronger team. We're putting our energy and our effort into things that have no substance.
Wow. That's big.
Yeah.
The idea that you're putting energy there, and that's taking away. So it makes me think of the 5 dysfunctions of a team, Lencioni, where it's all about artificial harmony.
Yeah. And there's a huge amount of that, I think, in the world right now, partly, I think, in response to how fractured and tense the world is. You know, there's so much turmoil and conflict and tension and outrage in the world. So there's a lot of people who react to that by just smoothing it over, by wanting to brush everything under the carpet and say it's all okay. You know, I had this really funny conversation yesterday with a potential client, and it just makes me smile so much because they want me to lead this conversation with an Indigenous group, a group of, I live in Canada, so a group of Francophone community members and a group of English community members and the agency, to see if they can come to some resolution on a whole bunch of historical conflict. And so like, that's a messy conversation. And one of the things they said to me is, well, we've checked you out, and what we're most worried about is that you might invite the conflict, even if it isn't there. I actually laughed really hard, and I said, I can't invite things that don't exist, right? Like, it's there. It might just be that I open the door and people choose to walk in because I opened the door for them. But the place they were coming from was this deep-seated fear of what happens if it gets messy. Like, what happens if we have this conversation and it becomes out of control? And I come from this belief that you have no control, actually, anyways. But you have less control when you're trying to control it. When you try not to control it, it flows in the direction of the commitment you have. So it's kind of counterintuitive. When you're trying to contain it, it explodes out and sparks out and shoots everywhere, right? But if you're like, just let's point it in a direction, let's believe we can figure this out, then it flows that way.
Yeah. Yes. So what do we, if we believe we can figure this out?
Yes. Yeah.
And as you were talking, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to open the door. The conflict is there, but me, Stephani, or, someone is your best chance.
Yeah.
I can be your guide.
Yes.
I can't control it. I can be your guide, and I can be your best chance at having some sort of a resolution that leaves you guys more whole, more human.
Yeah. We're connected in the end, closer to a solution. Yeah. So
that's a great point, that connected, right?
Yeah.
I think people want to feel more connected at work.
Yeah.
So what can you say to, the average Joe or Jane who feels tense, who always has that same person that drives them crazy at work, who, wants a promotion but doesn't even know how to begin to broach the topic with their boss who they're not sure is happy with their work, or, whatever. There's so many things that go on in a workplace. It's like a kettle.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who's feeling some tension and would love to open that door and feel more at ease and at peace?
So I could probably think of 100 things, but I'll give you 2 things.
Okay.
So the first one is, I think you got to make a choice about what are the big rocks you want to push up the hill, right? Because there could be a million things that make you crazy or aren't fulfilling you or are upsetting you. You need to pick a couple of them, not everything. Just decide what's the stuff that, so I always think about it like the biggest rocks you want to push up the hill. So what are the couple of things that are most important to you? Pick those things and then be willing to be totally honest and brave about them. Be willing to go to your boss to say, not what isn't working, but what you do want. So don't go to the other party you want to talk to in the relationship and say, here's what's not working for me. Go to them and say, here's what I want more of. I want more creativity. I want more interesting projects. I want more autonomy. I want more responsibility. Go tell them what you do want, which requires you to be vulnerable, to say, hey, I need something else. Don't tell them what you don't want. That part is evident. You don't want what you're doing right now. So tell them what you want more of. The second piece is the thing about being tense at work often comes from boundaries too. And so brave, honest conversations for me are not a free-for-all of just step into the emotion and anyone can say anything and everyone can, throw bombs and call names and then it'll all be fine. It's about really clear boundaries, like, and knowing where you draw them. So what does it mean to you to be treated with respect, and articulating that for people when the line has been crossed? Thanks for that, but I just need you to know that I can't be in this conversation if this is happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I would be willing to be in the conversation if we could do this. So to draw those lines really clearly, so that, and the picking the couple of things, not everything, and being really, really honest about what you want more of.
Yep. Great. And that, what you said about boundaries, of course, takes me right into what we were talking about before we went on record, which is this new trend of radical candor. So talk about the opportunity and the danger there.
Okay. So I am really familiar with radical candor, and I love the phrase and the term. And I think it's a really powerful, transformative concept, like a really has amazing possibility. Unfortunately, the way I have seen it implemented in a lot of organizations and by a lot of people is like a license to throw bombs whenever they need to say cruel and perhaps inappropriate things in a given situation to other people, to not necessarily come from a place of like unconditional positive regard, being committed to the do this or we can figure it out, but instead to just tell people, what they don't like about them. It also tends to reinforce power dynamics. So oftentimes people who hold official positions of power or sort of social positions of power tend to use radical candor to be more powerful. They wield it.
Say whatever they want.
That's right.
There's less risk for them.
Yeah. So, you made the analogy earlier about it's a bit like giving somebody a learner's permit and then handing them a Lamborghini. There's a world between the concept and the actual practice and implementation that achieves the connection, the team, the stronger relationships that isn't coming right from just the concept and the book and the easy, quick implementation. It takes work and effort to get to stronger relationships and better solutions and more connection. And just telling people what's on the top of your mind, it doesn't do that.
Doesn't do that. Okay, and I feel the clock ticking, so I want to be respectful of our viewers' time and of yours. Yeah. But one final thing is this power, what you said about the power. And I work with a lot of people in the middle manager and middle moving into more senior. And very often they're at a deficit of power in the relationship. So how do you, when someone has more power than you do in a relationship, but you need to tell them something, you need to give them feedback, you need to get something off your chest. And maybe we go back to the 2 points, the which rocks but what do you say to someone about the power thing? How can you express something without getting into trouble?
Yeah. So, I mean, first I would ask yourself, why are you expressing it, right? You need to be clear on what your intention is. You need to know your answer to that question. Why do you need to express the concern you're experiencing? Because if it's just because you don't like your boss or you don't like the hierarchy, that isn't going to help you. So know that first, because that is what allows you to be committed to something. You want to express the concern because you want to be better at your job, or you want to advance in the company, or you want more responsibility. Know those things. And then I think you need to let go of the fact that that person holds that position of power and approach them like a human being.
Yeah.
There's an enormous amount of fear people carry about, well, my boss, or leadership, or, I do a lot of work with elected officials. Oh, well, elected officials will think this, as if like generically people who hold positions of hierarchy in an organization all show up in a particular way. They're human beings.
They know everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So just recognize that you're dealing with another human being, and to the best of your ability, approach it like that.
Yeah.
So
you remind me of years ago, I had to have a tough conversation with my boss, and I got someone to coach me about it. And she said, you know what, don't forget to tell him what you appreciate first. Yes. And I learned something so huge, because he had been like this in the conversation. And when I acknowledged him and I said how happy I was in general, his shoulders, like it melted, and 20 pounds came off of him. And I learned in that moment that people above me don't know everything.
Yeah.
And they have their stress too.
Yes. And they're seeing fears and weaknesses that you do.
Yep.
You have a going to talk to them. You coming to talk to them. Yeah.
Yep. So, okay, I know we're probably over time, so we're going to close it down. I feel like we could talk for hours. I'm just going to, for people out there who are interested in this kind of work, you are Stephani Roy McCallum.
That's right.
The company is called
The Courageous Leadership Project.
Great.
Yeah. The website is bravelylead.com.
Bravelylead.com. Perfect. Yeah. Stephani, thank you so much. And
thanks, Claire.
We'll be talking again very soon.
That's great. Nice to see you.
You too. Bye.
Bye.